Welcome everybody to episode 4 of our Imagineer and Support Brokerage Network vlog. I'm Sarah Holmes. I'm one of the directors at Imagineer, and my colleague Liz is joining me, who's also founder and managing director at Imagineer. And we're really pleased today to bring our guest Chris Chinnock to you. And Chris is somebody who we've known for a few years now. I met him on a asset-based community development training day in Oxfordshire about 3 years ago now, pre-pandemic, when we were allowed to be in a room together. Feels like a very long time ago now. And we've been connecting in with each other mainly through training, but also just through shared views and aligned interests in our work with one another. And we thought it would be really great to have a chat and share that with our audience today, so you can find out a little bit more about Chris's work. So I'm not going to give anything away, but I'm going to introduce Chris and say, would you like to say hello and tell us about yourself?
So thank you so much, Sarah and Liz, for inviting me on. So yes, so my name's Chris, and I run a social enterprise called Our Creative Connection, based in Huddersfield, but working across the north of England pretty much at the moment. And I guess the tagline for that would be photography for social change. And I come at this from a perspective of sort of 20-ish years in community development, but also alongside that, working as a freelance photographer and also just creative community engagement, and seeing how creativity is a great starting point for lots of conversations. And yeah, so that's kind of what inspires me to kind of do the work that I do.
Great. What's been some of the things that you've been doing recently, Chris? What's been some of the project work you've been involved in?
The organisation sort of set it up last March, and the initial idea was around something called photo voice, which is a sort of methodology that is about using images for people to kind of share experiences and tell stories and reflect on their situation. And there's an approach that's been around for a long time. I first encountered it fairly recently, really, when I think during the pandemic. I think that slowed me down long enough to just think, like, you know, what would happen if you brought photography and community development together? Encountered this thing called photo voice, and the more I looked at it, the more I thought, oh, this looks really interesting, but also, why is nobody doing it? You know, in 20 years of community development, I was like, I ain't really heard about this. So that was the main focus. So some of the projects that we've been doing recently, I'll jump forward a bit in the story, I think, but yeah, so you asked me about recent work. We were just chatting before the start of the recording up in Skipton in North Yorkshire. I've been working with a group called Exclusively Inclusive on a photo voice project. So that's very much, the title of that was The World as We See It, and it was using images for people to kind of share their experiences of kind of living with labels, really, whether that's, you know, learning disabled or autistic, or whatever label people kind of wear. And we know through our conversations that labels can be a dangerous thing, can't they? That sometimes it can be used to just sort of describe the full person rather than just one aspect of what's going on for them. So we were sort of trying to unpick that a little and maybe challenge some stereotypes and just maybe surprise people with a few examples of, you know, the lives people lead outside of the labels that they've got. So that's been a really wonderful experience to be involved in. And so that I can say a little more about the methodology, but basically we create a set of images, gather together some stories, and then we exhibit that and invite people to come and see it. We're taking
so
that
the exhibitions are like quite public, aren't they? So
yeah.
Anyone can come along and see the exhibitions and be part of that.
Yeah, definitely. So with that one, we were lucky that we got the support of Skipton Town Hall, and that they hosted it for like 3 months. So we organised some different events to invite people along to come and engage with the work and have conversations and reflect on what they've seen. So I always say there's a few different sort of stages. So some of it is about people going on like a personal journey of like expressing what's going on for them, and then a bit wider than that, collectively within the group who are creating photos, there's a whole conversation within that group about it. But then once these images are created and they're up on the wall and on display, then you've got a whole other group of people who are able to sort of engage with that and participate in it. So I'm always looking for, you know, the most public spaces that we can find to get them up and out into. So, you know, work I've done in Huddersfield where I live, and we've got another one starting in September. We've got an old, there's a shop unit that they've got. Well, Huddersfield is now full of empty shop units, as many are, but so they're using some of them to kind of display artwork and things like that. So we had an exhibition at the start of this year with a different project and had it on display, like, you know, in the town centre. So people who don't even know the participants, don't even know the context, can come in, engage with the images, think about the stories, you know, share their sort of perspectives on it. And yeah, so it's been really amazing to kind of see it sort of develop that way, really.
That's
really
really
interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, that's cool. I was wondering, Chris, you know, out of the conversations that are generated through having the exhibitions and you know, bringing members of the community together to have a conversation, what are some of the things that happen as a result of those conversations? Can you share any kind of outcomes or outputs that have happened as a result?
I'm trying to think. So in terms of, well, I'll talk generally, and then I've got a couple of sort of specific examples. And
okay. Yeah.
So I think generally, and a lot of this depends on the group. So if I think about groups that I've worked with, some of it's been working with young people, some of it's been working with people who are sort of marginalised in some way. Often when you invite just the community in general, almost, you know, people come in with preloaded sort of expectations of what they're going to see, I think. So a lot of the feedback that we get is that, oh, you know, I didn't expect to see this, whether that's a young person who's, you know, talking about their emotions or talking about things that kind of, you know, get on their nerves or things that they're passionate about. So you get lots of feedback about, oh, you know, this has really changed my view of young people, or whatever. But then thinking about the project with exclusively inclusive in Skipton, the conversations that took place there were I think the impact of it is still ongoing. We're not sure what the outcome has been yet, except that it's unlocked a lot of conversations within the organizations locally, you know. So Richard Webber, who thinks the director of public health, I'm going to get this wrong now, so I apologize when he sees this, but I think he's the director of public health up there. So they came up with this idea of saying, well, more people need to see this. We want to support this going on tour. You know, we want to help get this kind of out to as many people as possible. So we're working with them now to organise a tour of the exhibition around all the libraries and community centres in North Yorkshire. So I think it's on. I think I don't know enough yet about what that long-term outcome might be, but I think that certainly there just seems to have struck a chord that where people see it and think, yeah, other people need to see this. I can think of one example of an image where the person, the image was a self-portrait of them doing that.
Okay.
And then the title of the image was Silenced. And then the description was, when services don't listen to me, I feel silenced.
Wow.
So, yeah. So,
that's,
you know, when you get, you know, and the question that we ask people to think about are, you know, we cover the full range, is like things that you care about, things that you're passionate about, things that you love to do, but also stuff that you find challenging, stuff, you know, experiences that are not so great. And people get to choose which ones they have in the exhibition. So that one has struck a chord with a lot of people who came to see it in that context. Yeah, because there's a lot of people out there who would see it as their job, as to kind of, you know, avoid that happening. And yet, you know, when it's there staring you in your face, this is how I feel, or certainly how I felt at that moment. Yeah, that prompted a lot of conversations. But there's loads of images like that. And I just think images, I don't know whether there's something about it being sort of on display on the wall, or is it enough that I could sort of maybe talk about what's going on in the image, even though I'm really talking about what's going on for me. And that includes, you know, it doesn't even have to be my photo for that to be the case. You know, so I think people find it quite an easy way to start thinking about things. But we've had all sorts of reactions to it. You know, a random person walking in off the street in a Huddersfield exhibition who, this wasn't an outcome I was aiming at, but, you know, ended up just in tears at the emotions that were kind of on display, and then started, and it invites people to start sharing their emotions and their stories. And so you have to be careful sometimes about where this can end. And I think that's the other thing to say is that some of it is I think it's important to say it's not a therapy, it's not therapeutic sort of thing that we're aiming at. You know, I'm very much in the community development space, and I think that's what the public exhibitions allow for. That it's about growing a conversation, so people share what's important to them to the extent that they want to share it, and some of that is deeply personal, and there can be a therapeutic aspect to what we're doing, because I think there's a sort of cathartic thing going on about sharing stuff that you care about. But the aim is always growing a conversation. You know, the exhibition allows us to think about, we've always got kind of not an audience in mind, but a message that we want to send to people. You know, what do we want people to think about? What would we like them to kind of know? And what would we like them to kind of go away feeling as a result of the exhibition?
It sounds interesting because you can see there's many different layers to the work that you're doing. So the frame is using photography as a way of being able to share how life has been or what somebody's passionate about. But you can see that there's different levels of how that can make a difference, I guess, or how people can engage with that. So there's that thing of actually for the person being in a space where they can share what them things are for themselves in a way that is recognized and is visual. So there's that visual connection to what's being shared. There's a group that is involved in the project that actually open up them conversations with each other about what that is and what that means. And then there's that next level of taking it into that community space as well. And what I'm hearing is that there's shifts and changes happening on each one of them levels. And it's great to hear the engagement that's come through from people that have just walked into that space and gone, okay, I wasn't expecting this, and that kind of having their eyes and minds open to some of the stuff that people are experiencing and what's going on for people. I'd love to hear more about what it's been like for people, you know, to go through that process of being alongside yourself in a project, to go through that process of having the space to think about what matters to me and all them different levels that you've explained, but then to see that visually as an end visual result that then is shared publicly.
Well, I think, I mean, a lot of the feedback, let me think, so it's quite broad because the groups of people that I'm working with and the organizations I'm working with, their context is always different. But when I look back on we do some reflective sessions at the end, and often we use images, you know, create an image that represents how you feel about the project, or, you know, what you've enjoyed most or what you found most difficult. And a lot of the themes are about, we talk about the voice aspect. For most people taking part, this is the first time that they've even just heard themselves, never mind be heard by other people, and found that empowering. Some people, what I love about it is people can kind of dive as deep or as not as they want, really. So some people really just get into the creative aspect of it, and they love that. And I've had lots of people who've said, like, I'm always looking around me now. I'm taking loads of photos around my surroundings, and you know, I'm not just kind of going about my day and just kind of doing stuff without thinking about it. So there's almost that aspect of it. Whereas others get energized by the message that we're talking about as well. So yeah, again, this is most current in my mind because literally we had the conversation on Tuesday night, but, you know, with the exclusively inclusive group, the questions that we were looking at, what I love about it is even if it's your photo, because it was like 12 months ago since we originally did the project, you know, when we came back to it, I got all the images out, put them out in this community center, and we looked at them again, and then it was like, okay, and that whole other stories start coming out.
Yeah.
So it's just ongoing, like the fact that the images exist in the world, how you felt about it 12 months ago, 6 months ago, last week, an hour ago, you know, a minute,
Really
it just
interesting,
changes all the time. Yeah, because the image doesn't change, but we change. Yeah, you know, the context that we're looking at it changes. So you're always going to see something different, because I always say that we, all three of us, could look at the same photo, but we're all going to see something different, because we're not actually looking at the photo, we're just transmitting onto it what our experiences have been, and what our story
guess
is.
we all bring our own lens, don't we?
Yeah, definitely.
In terms of how we interpret things, and it feels like this is a real kind of catalyst for a different conversation to take place, and I love the fact that it's stimulating community conversations, and acting as a kind of a resource to enable people to see things from a different angle. And I think that's really powerful, actually, because, you know, in our work, obviously at Imagineer, we're focused on self-direction. That, you know, that's one of our kind of founding principles is people being able to have a voice and take control of what goes on in their life, and how their life is managed and controlled and supported, and the different things that they can access, but underneath that, it's all the value-based kind of principles and foundations of things like inclusion and citizenship and being a member of your community and being a neighbour and having people in your life, relational connections, and all of those things. And you know, having a platform or a space where you can create those community conversations and help people to really, because it's not just about it's not theoretical, is it? As soon as you make it visual, and particularly with photographs, because it's based on real subject matter, isn't it? So it's tangible and it's relatable, and I think there's something really powerful about that, because immediately it gives people a context for the conversation that might be different to their kind of preconceived ideas. Like you were saying, people come in and have a look at things with an idea of what they're going to be seeing and looking at and talking about, and actually it's completely different. So that's really powerful stuff. And you know, we've spent years exploring this idea of strengths-based working, and you know, obviously that's how we came to kind of bump faces with you through the asset-based community development training that you're involved in, and the work that you're doing with nurture development. And you know, that's been part of our journey. Is it's more than just health and social care, it's more than just working with marginalized people or vulnerable people. Actually, we need to go deeper than that. We need to start with citizenship, being a person that lives in a community, and starting from that point to understand how we make strong connections, rather than connections that are on the basis of deficit or something missing or a risk or a need or a problem that needs solving. And actually the outcomes that can look so different when you start from that deeper basis of we relate on the basis of being human and being people and being citizens. So it's really interesting stuff. What are some of the things that you've brought in from asset-based community development that have helped you to think through how you're doing what you're doing now?
I mean, for context, I mean, I guess asset-based community development is one of those things where I very much feel like I'm trying to apply as much of the sort of principles around that in the work that I do. And when I was working with, so I used to work with nurture development for about 5 years, sort of straddling the pandemic almost. So sort of about 18 months of that during the pandemic, and then traveling around. So during my time with them, I was fortunate enough, you know, to learn alongside Cormac, and to really get under the kind of hood of ABCD in some ways. And then going out on the road and working across the UK and meeting lots of different people, and And I noticed there was a few things that struck me. One was that there was an awful lot of time spent just trying to find the right words, whether that's to describe what the hell it is that you do for a job, or to describe who it is you're trying to help, or what change you're trying to kind of see in the world. You know, I've done community development for 20 years and still struggle to describe what the flipping heck it is to friends or my wife. It's still like, what's that thing you do again? It's like, oh yeah, I don't know, something to do with charities. Yeah, I don't know. You know, it's not a kind of one word thing, is it? So I think there's always
not
been
tangible.
this kind of misunderstanding, or just many different versions of it. And then ABCD is this like amazing way of thinking about things and doing things. But even within that, you know, you could get lost within the language that surrounds it. And I always found it sort of slightly challenging that we'd focus too much on just kind of, you know, explaining what the words mean, rather than thinking about kind of like, what does this actually look like, feel like, taste like, smell like, you know, in real life. So that was one thing that I noticed, that, you know, it's almost like the conversation around the language just sucks all the energy out of the practice.
Yeah,
and also
that's so true.
And I think it's sort of, there's a hierarchy to it as well. So it's kind of like, if you know the lingo, you're in, and if you don't, you're not. And so there's something about that I was always a little bit like, I'm a practitioner.
That's quite excluding, isn't it?
Yeah,
for
it
people?
can be. I think,
yeah.
You know, I think there's a sort of an in crowd and an out crowd, and yeah. So I've always struggled with that side of that process, and just thought, yeah, if you know, half of that energy could be spent on just doing, being, you know, then maybe it would shift things in a different direction. So there's that one, and then the other one, I mean, just saying the thing about words as well is that the words are never the words of the people it's been used to describe as well. So it's never ever, you know, I don't know anyone who talks that way, who lives, you know, on my street or up the road. You know, it's not a language that we use. But then you think about, you've got services and organisations that are seeking to kind of be helpful, who are struggling to find words to describe the situations they're trying to help in, and then you've got people who are living in them spaces who are excluded because of the words, but also don't get the opportunity to kind of show. So these kinds of, just, you know, let me show you what's going on for me. Let me show you what the world looks like. Let me show you what good looks like. Let me show you what bad looks like. I'm really holding it down to not swear, just letting you know. But you know, some of these things can be really immediate. And that's the other thing I noticed, was that, you know, when we talk about community, often it is really fleeting moments. You weren't there, you wouldn't know. You blink and you miss it, it's gone. These are the kind of moments that really stand out for people when you invite them. You know, I must have asked this question a million times, you know, share a story of a time when neighbours came together to make things better. That's a really foundational question for the whole asset-based community development. Tell me a story about how people do community around here. Well, when you invite people to share that, most of the time they're talking about real informal, real street level, really kind of, you know, fleeting things. They would tell you stories about stuff that, doesn't happen in a community centre, doesn't apply for funding, doesn't kind of set up a group or anything like that. So all these things floating around. And then when I just started thinking through the pandemic, kind of, you know, what could be the role of photography in this space? You know, I was just kicking myself that I hadn't really put two and two together sooner, really. That actually, you know, the ABCD sets is an amazing kind of framework for doing things. But actually, I think there's a piece prior to that around just almost, that establishing kind of what's going on, but in a visual way. So I had once those kind of things became connected in my brain, I was like, I need to explore this further. We looked, it just felt, as I was looking around, Photo Voice felt like a really great framework for that. But what, like I say, it's existed for a long time as a methodology, but has tended to be in the sort of either in international development or in the sort of social research space. So
Mhm.
again, it's always, so again, there's like a power dynamic within that as well, that, you know, we're only interested in what things look like from your perspective. Is like, you can tell me how great, you know, that I'm asking the question, right? So again, when I think about, I think I'm bringing the ABCD sort of approach to photo voice a little bit, and centering the participants more, and making it less about social research, other than a kind of personal or very community orientated journey that you'll go on. It's not about creating an academic report at the end of it, which tends to be the focus of a lot of photo voice stuff. It's quite, it can still be in that quite, and I'm not knocking that. I think it's great. It's a great way of doing that, but that's just not my thing. So I think I tried to sort of bring the lessons that I learned, you know, with nurture development, but also prior to that, I've worked in local government. Prior to that, I ran a social enterprise. So I feel like, you know, you're just constantly gathering things together and thinking, okay, how can these things fit into what I'm doing now, in a way. So yeah, so I feel like I'm sort of doing, I don't think I'm doing ABCD, because I think that's an involved long-term sort of thing, but I think I'm definitely drawing on, yeah, that strengths-based, the asset-based side of it, in a big way.
Yeah, it's great to hear how you touched on it earlier, around how in what we do, we can have so many influences into how we do this and what we do and what's the frame for it. And, you know, so you've been through that whole process of running your own social enterprise, working in that local government space, being alongside the asset-based community development space, and then found yourself here with doing the photo voice. But it just seems, on hearing your story, one thing that's been, what sounds as though it's been a really strong element of you navigating to the place where you are now, is really sticking quite strongly to your sense of purpose, and actually taking all these influences to get you to the space of, okay, well, that makes sense, and that makes sense, and this makes sense, but actually this is where my purpose is. And I'm bringing all these influences in, but I'm now in this, you know, I'm now doing it this way, which
well, that's awesome to hear you say that. I mean, I don't think even a year ago I would have guessed where things would be now, really. You know, I've been amazed, really. But yeah, I definitely feel that it's just connected a couple of things for me. I always felt like I was kind of had a sort of split working lives, really. You know, I did this community development stuff, and then I did this creative stuff, and then sort of never the twain shall meet, really. But just bringing the two together, yeah, it definitely feels, everything that I did up to this point was just getting ready for this. I've never really felt that before, so yeah.
And it is, in a sense, what you are doing. It is that stuff, isn't it? It's the asset-based community development stuff. This is the format that it's been facilitated in, and bringing people together, learning about each other, drawing on each other's skills and strengths, sharing, widening the networks, bringing more people into the conversation. You know, that's what I'm hearing from what you've shared. So,
yeah, well, I think, you know, I had a good chat with Cormac fairly recently about this, you know, and because just just as a bit of a catch up with him, really. But we got talking about sort of how, you know, photo voice is a kind of way of doing things, and ABCD is a way of doing things. It can be really complementary, and, you know, in lots of ways.
Absolutely.
So I could totally see that. And I think, yeah, as a beginning, or as almost as a I mean, you know, it's like that. I used to get really fed up with organisations going, oh, you know, we've done a map of you know, what's going on, and it was always like, here's a building and here's a group, and I'm always like, you know, what there are more
directory.
You know, I'm not knocking those things, but yeah, like, that doesn't make a community, does it? You know, most of these things are just organisations who are doing their thing. What about the kind of people who are there? And yeah, I think this is just a way of like raising up some of those things, and again, that visual way. You know, I don't have to try and find the words to describe it. Let me just show you what it looked like, and you can make your own conclusion as to whether you think that was a good or bad thing or whatever. And that's the other thing, you know, is it's not a journalism thing. We're not looking for some sort of objective truth or any, you know, it's just this is what I think or how I feel, or, you know, whatever. And we might disagree, you know, and that's all right as well. But
Yeah.
if
And it's making it relatable,
if that's how you
isn't it?
feel about it, if that's how things look like for you, at least, you know, we can begin there. Think, okay, if that's how
Yeah.
things, if that's what it looks like for you, then okay, let's talk about that. And so often you've got services that are seeking to sort of be helpful, and they don't have the for whatever reason, you know, they don't have the experience of yeah, I don't know, whatever the challenges that you're trying to do, you know, of going hungry or being skint or whatever. So it's kind of like, I'm not saying they should, but at least, you know, it's not a disservice to them, but just acknowledge it, that like we don't know what that looks like or feels like, you know, you would struggle. And yeah, when I've been skint, you know, I would struggle to kind of explain that to someone. But I might have been able to show you what it looked like.
Yeah. And you know, in all the conversation that we've been having today, the one thing that's been running through my mind is how this connects in with self-directed support, and how, and you know, that whole thing of, we have a social care system that has an expectation of people going through assessment processes and support planning, whatever else, you know, the whole process that's been designed around those members of you know, society, the citizens who are accessing social care support, and how different it would be if people were able to share what's happening for them at that moment in time in a completely different way to having to fill in an assessment form, and totally. You know, go through, you know, what else could be shared, and how else it could be shared in a way that's actually relatable.
Well, I think it's, I mean, I think that you've really hit on something that I've been thinking about is, you know, a lot of our conversation has been about this community orientated way of doing things, but I mean, you know, people who work inside organizations get fed up with it too, don't they? You know, trying to describe this sort of 5-dimensional world in a 1-dimensional document. And so I'm really interested in what could the role of image making be in that space as well? You know, how could people who were what do you call them, the sort of support plan stuff, you know, the brokerage work you guys do, you know, well, what if that was a visual record rather than a written one, or at least that they work together? You know, this is what a good life would look like, you know, what it did look like, what it looks like now, or I don't know, it just gives a different perspective. And even inside organizations, you know, how are people communicating between themselves? Often it's, you know, you end up with loads of horrible jargon trying to describe situations, whereas you know, what would it look like if people working on the delivery side of things showed senior management what their day-to-day looked like? Would that change how decisions got made? I think it would.
And we've touched on it already today, haven't we, about how labels, language, you know, sometimes actually the spoken word and how we relate to each other using spoken word isn't helpful, and we get caught up in the wrong spaces and the wrong places on the basis of the words that are shared in what we're trying to express, or what we were trying to show people, or, you know, and actually sometimes it does take another approach to being able to relate to each other, to make that more of a positive interaction. And we've been really some of the work that we have done around support planning, we've brought creativity in. So we use graphic facilitation, as you know, which is a great way of people. We've used music. So there's been times where we've been doing some work alongside people and listening to the story, and they've been in that space of being asked questions around, well, what have you done, and where have you been, and what's life like for you now? And that's kind of quite difficult to share. But we've shifted that to one side and actually just opened the space to bring music into that space instead. And how that shifted people's, how they've shared what's happening for them is completely shifted on the basis of relating to each other on a different level. So we've utilised music in that way. But, you know, photo voice and the work you're doing, I can see a really strong connection. That actually, that I can see that would bring a similar experience for people. rather than this list of questions that's on a
Yeah.
form.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it feels much more, as I say, I think when it's an image and we're looking at the image that's perhaps up on the wall or, you know, on the table or whatever, yeah, we can both contribute to it, can't we? You know, it's like, I'd love to know more about what you're doing with music as well, because I think that's really interesting. It's another power. It's just creativity, isn't it? Just a different way of beginning that kind of interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for sharing with us the work that you do and how that's going and the difference it's making as well.
That was all right. Didn't waffle too much.
No, not at all. It's been
Right,
fantastic. So we always like to finish the vlogs with coming back around to what we have as a mission as an organisation, which is really around creating a fairer society for everyone who's in society. So we want to kind of just pick your brain really about what your imagination is around what a fairer society would look like.
Wow. I mean, you look at what's going on at the moment in terms of, you know, cost of living and you know, we're still kind of dealing with COVID and I think that, you know, these things really just highlight the sort of inequalities of you know, people just having agency over politics and decisions that are made sort of around. So yeah, I think a fairer one, you know, I have to kind of think about the political space as well and think about how do we change the way those big decisions are getting made, you know, whether that's, I don't know, some citizen assemblies or some sort of kind of overturn of the way votes get counted or what. But I think there's, you know, I think we're at that kind of crossroads really. You know, it feels like whatever's going on politically at a national level and then locally as well, most people are still really just disengaged with that, aren't they? So it's, you know, finding a way of kind of, but you know, loads of people are kind of annoyed about it, but also how do we kind of get people kind of back in? So I'm really interested in that. I think that, you know, bringing politics with a small p, would it be like not party political, but just making politics sort of part of the everyday conversations and about what can we do locally, what could we contribute to sort of, you know, wider than that. You know, the environmental side of it as well, you know, that's kind of got to be, it feels like everything else is distracting us from these bigger questions that are really fundamental as well. So that would be my take on it. Yeah, how are we involving people kind of locally in that kind of discussion and that kind of action as well?
Yes, Chris. And if you had a question for our next guest, what would it be?
You pre-warned me about this one, and yet I'm still like, your next guest. Who's your next guest likely to be? Do you know? Or do we have
We've got a few lined up, but we don't want to give too much away.
All right, okay. Yeah. So someone asked me once, and I liked it. So this isn't my question, so I take no credit for it. But yeah, what's the best mistake you've ever made?
Oh, that's a good one.
That is a good question.
Like that.
Yeah. So
well, we will be asking that to our next guest. So thank you. We'll let them know where the question came from. Well, via you.
Yeah. They can send me.
Thanks so much for your time,
messages.
Chris. If people wanted to find out more about your work, how would they connect in with you?
Yeah, so the website is ourcreativeconnection.org. I do mainly LinkedIn or Twitter. So at Chris_Chinnock on Twitter or at Our Creative Connection on LinkedIn. So yeah, find me on there.
What we'll do is we'll include the links to your social media in the comments section on the YouTube channel so people can follow you that way. And Sarah, if people wanted to know more about Imagineer, how can they stay in touch on our social media?
Whole load of different ways. So we've got Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn accounts, all Imagineer CIC. We've got our YouTube channel, which you are hopefully viewing this on, but please do actually go into our full channel and subscribe if you like our content. It will help to push up our content in the search rankings and means more people will get to hear about our work and Chris's work in this case. But also just we really want to increase the conversation around self-direction and citizenship. So the more people who subscribe to the channel, the more people will see our content, which is great. We've got a website, www.imagineer.org.uk. On the website, there is a contact form, so you can get in touch with us via the contact form. And we've also got a mailing list. So if you click on the subscribe button on our website, you can join our mailing list. We send out a monthly newsletter. Chris, you've got a mailing list too, haven't you? So we'll
yes, I have. It's a bit ad hoc though.
Yeah, we'll share that. But yeah, so there's lots of different ways you can get in touch. If you like any of what you've heard today and you think it triggers an idea for a collaboration or a partnership, or just sharing your work with us, if you're an organisation and you like the conversation we've just had with Chris and you fancy coming and having a similar conversation with us, please get in touch. But what we're trying to do also through our platform is use our platform for social good for our audience and for other people's audiences as well. So where we find other organisations doing good work that aligns with the principles of how we work at Imagineer, we'd love to share your content with our audience. And if you could share our content with your audience, it just means that we're extending our reach as well. So if any of those things sound like something you're interested in, or if you're just interested in what we do as an organisation, you'd like to get involved in some of our training, access our resources, which are on the website. There's lots of different ways that you can get involved. So yeah, visit the website. That's kind of the gateway to everything else. But as always, we'll put all the information in the notes underneath this episode so that you can follow on if you're interested. So thank you for being with us today, Chris. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you. It's been fantastic.
Thank you everybody for being with us as well. If you're still watching, well done. And visit us again soon. If you subscribe, then you'll get a notification when the next episode is up on the YouTube channel. So yeah, stay in touch, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you soon for our next conversation. Thanks very much.